pain doesn't always announce itself with tears or screams. Sometimes it's silent, like the moment you realize the people you gave everything to see you as nothing. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've learned that stories like mine resonate with more people than you'd think. My name is Serenity Wilson. At 58, I've spent 40 years of my life raising 3 children, building a real estate portfolio that spans half of Boston, and perfecting the art of invisibility. The invisibility wasn't intentional at first. When you're young and vibrant, people notice you. When you're a mother, your children see you, at least when they need something. But somewhere around my 50th birthday, I realized I had become background noise in my own family's lives. The invisibility hurt at first. Then I realized it was power. "Mom, are you listening?" My daughter Alice's voice cut through my thoughts as we sat in my spacious kitchen. At 34, she had my high cheekbones but her father's cold blue eyes. "We need to finalize the cabin arrangements for next month. The annual family vacation. A tradition I started after their father died 12 years ago. I paid, of course. I always paid." "I'm listening," I said, folding my hands on the granite countertop. "What did you decide?" "Well, Jason and Claire will take the master suite since they have Lily now." Alice referred to my oldest son and his wife, who had blessed me with my only grandchild 2 years ago. "Michael and Sophia want the Lakeview room because of her migraines, and Stephen and I will take the room with the private deck." I nodded slowly, noticing the omission. "And where will I sleep?" Alice had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but it passed quickly. "Well, that's the thing. The cabin only has 3 bedrooms, but there's that cute little glamping tent set up on the property. It's actually really nice, has electricity and everything." "The tent," I repeated. "Yes, it's adorable, very rustic chic." Alice stirred her overpriced coffee that I had prepared for her. "Besides, you're always up at dawn anyway. You'll love being close to nature." I smiled, the same smile I'd perfected through decades of disappointments. "Of course." "Great," she brightened, already typing on her phone. "I'll let everyone know it's settled." I watched my daughter's manicured fingers dance across her screen, manicures I had paid for throughout her teens and college years. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the light, a gift from me for her 30th birthday. The designer handbag casually slung over the kitchen chair had been last Christmas's present. The handbag alone cost more than what my parents had spent on my entire college education. My late husband, Richard, had left me comfortable but not wealthy when he died unexpectedly of a heart attack. What the children didn't know was how I'd transformed his modest insurance policy and savings into an empire. While they thought I was just their boring, predictable mother who occasionally helped with rent or tuition, I was purchasing and renovating buildings throughout Boston's rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. My company, Reborn Properties, operated under my maiden name, Serenity Russell. None of my children had ever bothered to ask about my life before their father. They wouldn't recognize the name if they saw it. "Mom, did you hear what I said?" I blinked, returning to the present. "I'm sorry. What?" Alice sighed with the distinctive exasperation my children reserved for me. I said, "Can you handle the grocery shopping before we all arrive? You know how chaotic it gets when everyone shows up hungry?" "Of course," I replied. "I'll take care of it." "Perfect. You're the best." She kissed my cheek perfunctorily, gathered her things, and was gone in a flurry of expensive perfume and casual dismissal. I remained at the kitchen island, fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup, thinking about the tent. The Lake Winnipesaukee cabin was actually a 4,500 square foot luxury home I'd purchased 5 years ago as an investment property. I kept it for family use during the summer and rented it out the rest of the year, another income source my children knew nothing about. They assumed it belonged to Mom's friend, who generously let us use it each summer. When I arrived the day before everyone else, driving my sensible Volvo loaded with groceries, I noticed the glamping tent immediately. It was indeed cute, a canvas bell tent erected on a wooden platform at the edge of the property, about 50 yards from the main house. Inside was a queen-sized bed with crisp white linens, battery-powered lanterns, and a small dresser. The adjacent bathhouse had a toilet and shower. It wasn't uncomfortable, just unmistakably separate. I unpacked the groceries, prepared several meals in advance, and arranged welcome baskets in each bedroom, except my tent. Then I sat on the expansive deck overlooking the lake, watching the sunset with a glass of wine, contemplating how I had become the help rather than the matriarch. They arrived the next afternoon in a convoy of expensive vehicles. My oldest son, Jason, in his Range Rover, with his wife, Claire, and my granddaughter, Lily. My middle son, Michael, and his wife, Sophia, in their Tesla. And Alice with her husband, Stephen, in their Mercedes SUV. I greeted them on the porch, accepting brief hugs before they exclaimed over the house and rushed to claim their rooms. "Grandma!" 2-year-old Lily ran to me with outstretched arms, the only one genuinely happy to see me. I scooped her up, breathing in her sweet scent. "There's my sunshine," I whispered, holding her close. Claire approached, designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly highlighted hair. "Thanks for stocking the fridge, Serenity. You're a lifesaver." I nodded, setting Lily down as she squirmed to get free. My daughter-in-law had never called me Mom or anything similar. We maintained a polite distance that suited us both. The first day passed pleasantly enough. I prepared meals, cleaned up afterward, and made myself useful and unobtrusive. By evening, everyone was settled on the deck with cocktails while I put Lily to bed, reading her 3 stories until she drifted off to sleep. When I rejoined the adults, they were deep in conversation about real estate. "The market in Boston is insane," Stephen was saying. "Our rent just went up again, 15%. Highway robbery." "Same here," Michael added. "That reborn company bought our building last year. They've been renovating everything and jacking up prices." I took a seat quietly, picking up my glass of wine. "Reborn properties?" I asked innocently. "I think I've heard of them." "They're everywhere," Alice complained. "Very mysterious operation. No one knows who runs it, but they own half the decent buildings in the city now." "Probably some hedge fund bros," Stephen said dismissively. "Making life impossible for normal people." I sipped my wine. "Perhaps they're just good at what they do," Jason snorted. "Good at squeezing every penny out of tenants, you mean?" "They're actually improving the properties," I pointed out. "From what I've heard." "Mom, whose side are you on?" Alice laughed. "You don't understand real estate. These companies are predatory." I smiled thinly. "You're probably right." The conversation shifted, and I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. The path to my tent was lit with solar lights, guiding me away from my family and into my designated space. As I prepared for bed in the small bathhouse, I heard laughter from the main house, the sounds carrying easily through the night air. I slept surprisingly well in the tent, waking at dawn as Alice had predicted. I made coffee in the main house and sat on the dock, watching the mist rise off the lake. By the time everyone else began stirring, I had breakfast ready: French toast, fresh fruit, bacon, and coffee. "Mom, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble," Jason said, helping himself to a generous portion. "It's no trouble," I replied. "I enjoy cooking for you all." "We should do something nice for Mom today," Michael suggested, mouth full of bacon. "She's always taking care of us." "Absolutely," Claire agreed. "What would you like to do, Serenity?" "I'm happy just spending time together," I said, the expected response. "See? Mom's easy to please," Alice said, as if my contentment with simple pleasures was a character flaw rather than a virtue. The day unfolded with boating, swimming, and a hike that everyone except Sophia and I participated in. Sophia begged off with a migraine, retreating to her darkened bedroom. I stayed behind to prepare dinner and watch Lily. By the 3rd night, the patterns were firmly established. I cooked, cleaned, and cared for my granddaughter while the others enjoyed themselves. Occasionally, one of them would say, "Mom, sit down and relax." But they made no actual space for me in their conversations or activities. I didn't mind the work. What cut deep was the assumption, the entitlement, the way my presence was acknowledged only in relation to what I could provide. On the 4th night, everything changed. We had finished dinner, a seafood boil I had spent hours preparing. The wine had been flowing freely, and my children and their spouses were looser, louder than usual. I began clearing plates when Alice stopped me. "Mom, wait. We want to talk to you about something." I set down the stack of dishes, noticing how they had positioned themselves across from me. A united front. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach tightening with maternal intuition. "We've been talking," Jason began, taking the lead as the eldest, "about your living situation." "My living situation?" I repeated. "You're rattling around in that big house all alone," Michael chimed in. "It doesn't make sense financially." "You're getting older," Alice added, her voice taking on that special tone people use with children and the elderly. "We worry about you." I looked at each of their faces, these adults I had raised, nurtured, and launched into the world. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." "Of course you are," Jason said soothingly. "But wouldn't it make more sense to sell the house, move into something more manageable, and maybe help your kids out a little? Real estate in Boston is killing us, Mom." And there it was, the real agenda, laid bare. "I see," I said quietly. "You want me to sell my home so I can subsidize your lifestyles." "That's not fair," Alice protested. "We're thinking about your future too. What if you fall? Who would help you?" "I'm 58, not 88, I replied, my voice level. "And I'm in excellent health." "Mom, don't be difficult," Michael sighed. "We're trying to help." "By suggesting I sell my home and give you the money?" An uncomfortable silence fell around the table. Stephen broke it with a laugh that attempted to lighten the mood. "Come on, Serenity, you're not using all that space. Meanwhile, your kids are struggling to keep up with insane rents. It's not like you need the money for anything." I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. "And what would happen to me in this scenario?" I asked. "Where would I live?" They exchanged glances. "Well," Jason began hesitantly, "Claire and I have that finished basement. It would need some work, but—" "I'm sorry," I interrupted. "You want me to sell my home and live in your basement?" "It's a really nice basement," Claire offered, as if that made the suggestion less insulting. I looked around at these people, my children and the spouses they had chosen, and for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to see them clearly. "I think I'll turn in for the night," I said, rising from the table. No one protested. No one apologized. Their silence confirmed everything. "Think about it, Mom," Alice called after me. "It just makes sense." I walked to my tent in the darkness, the path illuminated only by the feeble solar lights and a partial moon. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed, perfectly still, letting the hurt transmute into something harder, colder, more useful. By morning, I had made my decision. Breakfast was a subdued affair. I made pancakes shaped like animals for Lily, who squealed with delight at each one. My children avoided my eyes, perhaps sensing they had crossed a line. "Beautiful day," I remarked pleasantly, serving coffee. "What's everyone planning?" The tension eased as they realized I wasn't going to make a scene. Plans were discussed: boating, a trip to the local ice cream shop, maybe tennis later. Normal vacation activities. I smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals. "What about you, Mom?" Michael asked, an olive branch. "I thought I might drive into town for a bit," I replied. "Some errands to run." Nobody questioned what errands I might have in a town I visited only once a year. Nobody offered to accompany me. Nobody cared. In my sensible Volvo, I drove not to the quaint town center, but to a sleek office building 30 minutes away. The sign on the door read, "Reborn Properties, Northeast Division." My assistant, Margaret, looked up in surprise as I entered. "Serenity, I thought you were on vacation with your family." "I am," I replied, settling into the chair across from her desk. "But something's come up. I need you to pull the rental files for Beacon Hill Apartments, the Harborview, and Riverside Terrace." These were the 3 properties where my children lived, all owned by Reborn, all managed through shell companies and property management firms. I had deliberately kept my distance from these particular investments, allowing others to handle the day-to-day operations. "Right away," Margaret said, efficient as always. She had been with me for 10 years and knew better than to ask questions. While she gathered the files, I made several phone calls. By the time she returned, I had arranged meetings with my attorney and financial advisor for the following week. "Here you are," Margaret said, placing 3 folders on the desk. "Is there anything specific you're looking for?" Just reviewing tenant agreements, I said vaguely. And Margaret, please don't mention my visit to anyone. Family vacation and all. I'm supposed to be relaxing. I gave her a conspiratorial smile. Of course, she nodded. Your secret's safe with me. I spent an hour reviewing the files. Jason and Claire paid $3,800 monthly for their 2-bedroom at Beacon Hill. Michael and Sophia paid $3,200 for their 1-bedroom at the Harborview. Alice and Stephen paid $400 for their 2-bedroom at Riverside Terrace. All were slightly below market rates. I had unconsciously been giving them deals without their knowledge. I made several notes, then returned the files to Margaret. I need you to draft notices of non-renewal for these 3 units, I said. Effective 60 days from now. She looked startled. All 3? Those are some of our best tenants. Always pay on time. Yes, I agreed. But we have renovation plans for those units. Premium upgrades that will increase their value significantly. Of course, she nodded, making notes. Will the current tenants have an opportunity to renew at the higher rate? I considered this. Send them the standard letter about building improvements requiring vacancy with no option to renew. If they inquire directly, tell them the units are already promised to other tenants. Understood, Margaret said. Anything else? One more thing. I need 3 separate purchase agreements drawn up for smaller units in our secondary properties. Studio apartments, basic amenities, nothing fancy. For relocating the tenants? She asked. Something like that, I replied. Make sure the rent is exactly market rate, nothing discounted. And Margaret? Process everything under the shell companies, not reborn directly. On the drive back to the lake house, I felt a strange calm. What I was doing wasn't revenge exactly. At least not yet. It was simply removing the invisible support I had unwittingly provided for years. If my children saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource to be used, perhaps it was time they learned to stand on their own. When I returned, the house was empty except for Sophia, who lay on the couch with a cold compress over her eyes. Another migraine? I asked quietly. She murmured. They went to the beach. I couldn't face the sun. I fetched her water and her medication, sitting beside her until she drifted off to sleep. Sophia was the kindest of my children's partners, delicate, artistic, and genuinely appreciative of the little things I did. Sometimes I wondered if she saw more than she let on. The rest of the week passed without incident. I cooked, I cleaned, I slept in my tent, and I played the role of the supportive mother who had seemingly forgotten her children's proposal to sell her home for their benefit. The topic wasn't raised again, but I caught them exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking, planning their next approach perhaps. On our final night, we had a barbecue on the deck. Jason manned the grill, the one traditionally masculine task my sons were willing to perform, while I prepared side dishes and set the table. Mom, this has been such a great week, Alice said, helping herself to the potato salad I'd made. We should do this more often. Twice a year instead of just summer, Michael agreed. Maybe a winter getaway somewhere warm? That sounds lovely, I said, though I'm not sure my friend would approve of us using the cabin more frequently. About that, Jason interjected. Who is this mysterious friend anyway? We've been coming here for years and never met them. I smiled. Just someone I've known for a long time. Well, they must be loaded, Stephen commented, gesturing around at the luxurious house. Place like this must be worth what? $2 million? At least, Claire agreed. The lakefront alone. Maybe your friend would consider selling, Alice suggested slyly. We could all chip in and keep it in the family. I nearly laughed at the irony. I don't think they're interested in selling, but I'll mention it. After dinner, as the sun set over the lake, Jason raised his glass. A toast, he announced. To Mom for making this week possible. We love you. Hear, hear, they all echoed, raising their glasses. I smiled and raised mine in return, studying their faces in the golden light. My children, who had grown into beautiful, accomplished, and utterly entitled adults. Not one of them had ever asked about my dreams, my ambitions beyond motherhood. Not one had considered that I might have an identity separate from what I could provide them. I love you all too, I said, meaning it despite everything. That was the cruel paradox of parenthood. You could love deeply and still see clearly. As they chattered and laughed, I sat quietly, already gone from their conversation. My mind was on the letters that would arrive at their apartments in a week's time, on the shocked phone calls that would follow, on the gradual unraveling of the comfortable lives they had taken for granted. Later that night, in my tent, I listened to the sounds of the lake, water lapping against the shore, night birds calling, the distant murmur of voices from the house. For the last time, I allowed myself to feel the hurt of being relegated to the outskirts of my own family. Tomorrow, I would begin the transformation from invisible mother to visible force. They thought I was just an old woman who had outlived her usefulness. They were about to discover how wrong they were. 2 weeks after returning from the lake house, my phone began to ring incessantly. First Jason, then Michael, and finally Alice, all calling within hours of each other, voices tight with panic. "Mom, you won't believe this," Jason's voice crackled through the speaker. "We just got a notice. They're not renewing our lease." I stirred my tea calmly, seated in my garden where late summer flowers bloomed in carefully planned profusion. "Oh, that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate? It's a disaster. The Boston rental market is impossible right now, and with Lily in preschool, we can't just move anywhere." "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said. "You and Claire are resourceful." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" His voice rose in disbelief. "What would you like me to say, Jason?" I asked quietly. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the calculations happening in his mind. "Well, remember what we talked about at the lake? About your house being too big? Maybe this is a sign, you know? The timing might be perfect for all of us." "I see," I said. "So you'd like me to sell my home now so you can buy a new place? Or even just help with a down payment?" He backpedaled slightly. "The market's insane, Mom." "Yes, so I've heard," I replied. "Let me think about it." Similar conversations played out with Michael and Alice. Both received notices of non-renewal. Both called me in panic. Both eventually suggested that perhaps now was the perfect time for me to downsize and help them secure new housing. Not one of them asked if I was okay, if I needed anything, or how my day was going. I was simply a potential solution to their problems. I let a week pass before inviting them all to Sunday dinner. They arrived looking stressed, exchanging stories about their housing woes while I served pot roast, their childhood favorite. "I can't believe all three of us got these notices at the same time," Alice said, stabbing at her carrots. "It's like some kind of conspiracy." "Reborn properties," Michael muttered darkly. I looked them up. They're buying buildings all over the city, renovating them, and doubling the rents. "Exactly what I told you at the lake," Stephen added. "Predatory capitalism at its finest." I smiled faintly as I refilled their wine glasses. "How unfortunate." "We've been looking at other apartments," Claire said, cutting Lily's meat into tiny pieces. "Everything in our price range is either a closet or in a dangerous neighborhood." "Mom," Jason began, making eye contact with his siblings. "We've been talking about your house." "Have you?" I set down the gravy boat and took my seat at the head of the table. "It's the perfect solution," Alice jumped in eagerly. "You sell this place. It must be worth $2 million at least in this market. And we use some of the proceeds to secure housing for everyone." "And where would I live?" I asked, the question hanging in the air just as it had at the lake house. "We've been researching senior communities," Michael said, as if this had been my idea all along. "Really nice ones, with activities and people your age." "I'm 58, I reminded him. "Some of them accept residents as young as 55, Claire added helpfully. "They're not nursing homes, Serenity. They're like resorts." "And how much of my home's sale would go toward this resort?" I asked, more uncomfortable glances around the table. "Well," Jason began carefully, "those places can be expensive, but your house is worth a lot. There would still be plenty left to help us with our housing situations." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of wine. "I understand. You want me to sell my home, move into a senior community, and distribute the remaining funds among you so you can buy or rent new places. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible," Alice protested. "We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone." "For everyone," I repeated. "I see. Mom, don't be difficult. Jason sighed. We're in a crisis here. I set down my glass and looked at each of them in turn. These adults I had raised, who now viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenient resource to be allocated. I have a better idea, I said. They perked up, anticipation evident in their expressions. I do have some investment properties you might not know about, I continued. Small units, nothing fancy, but they're available immediately. I could offer them to you at market rate. You have investment properties? Michael looked shocked. Since when? I've been saving and investing for years, I said vaguely. Did you think I spent every penny on you? That's great, Mom, Jason said, clearly recalculating. Where are these places? Dorchester, Roxbury, and East Boston, I replied. As I said, nothing fancy, but clean and safe. Their faces fell in unison. These were not the upscale neighborhoods they were accustomed to. That's really far from my office, Alice said immediately. And Lily's preschool is in Beacon Hill, Claire added. We appreciate the offer, Mom, but, Michael began. But you'd prefer I sell my home instead? I finished for him. Silence fell around the table. It just makes more sense, Stephen finally said. Your house is way too big for one person. These units you're talking about, they're probably more your size anyway. So I should move into one of them? I asked innocently. Well, no, Jason backpedaled. You deserve better than that. That's why we're suggesting a nice senior community. I nodded, picking up my fork again. I'll tell you what. Come by my office tomorrow at 10. I'll show you the available units, and if you're not interested, we can discuss alternatives. Your office? Alice asked, confused. Reborn Properties, I said calmly, watching their expressions. I believe you're familiar with it? For a moment, no one spoke. Then nervous laughter erupted around the table. Good one, Mom, Michael said. For a second there, I thought. 10 o'clock, I repeated, my voice steady. The Newberry Street office. My assistant Margaret will be expecting you. Mom, what are you saying? Jason asked, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. I'm saying I have a solution to your housing problem, I replied. And I'm saying there's quite a bit about me you don't know. I stood, beginning to clear plates, though no one had finished eating. Now, who wants dessert? I made your favorite apple pie. They exchanged bewildered glances, clearly unable to process what I had just revealed. I moved around the table, the perfect hostess, slicing pie and adding dollops of vanilla ice cream to each plate while my children sat in stunned silence. Eat up, I encouraged, passing out dessert. And don't forget your appointment tomorrow. 10 o'clock sharp. I don't like to be kept waiting. The Reborn Properties office occupied the top floor of a restored brownstone on Newberry Street. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city I had quietly conquered over the past decade. I arrived at 9, giving myself time to prepare for the confrontation to come. They've been calling non-stop since 7 this morning, Margaret informed me, setting a cup of coffee on my desk. I've never heard people so confused. I imagine they are, I replied, smoothing my charcoal gray suit. I had dressed carefully today, no more casual mom clothes. Today I was Serenity Russell, CEO of Reborn Properties. Are you sure about this? Margaret asked hesitantly. In 10 years, she had never questioned my decisions. Absolutely certain, I said, opening my laptop. Shall we review the portfolio before they arrive? By 9:55, Margaret's phone buzzed. They're here, she said. All 6 of them. Give them 5 minutes in the waiting room, I instructed. Then send them in. Those 5 minutes were a small but satisfying part of my plan. Let them sit amidst the evidence of my success, piecing together the reality their mother had kept hidden for years. At precisely 10:00, my office door opened. They filed in silently, Jason and Claire, Michael and Sophia, Alice and Stephen, eyes wide as they took in the expansive office with its awards, architectural renderings, and spectacular view. Welcome to Reborn Properties, I said, remaining seated behind my impressive walnut desk. Please sit down. They sat stiffly on the leather sofa and chairs arranged in front of my desk, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Is this some kind of joke? Jason finally asked. Does it look like a joke? I gestured around the office. You're telling us you own Reborn Properties? Michael's voice was incredulous. The company that's kicking us out of our apartments? I'm not just telling you, I replied calmly. I'm showing you. And yes, Reborn owns your buildings, among others. How is this possible? Alice asked. Your mom. The way she said mom, like it was synonymous with insignificant, crystallized everything. I have been just mom to you for decades, I agreed. But to the rest of Boston, I'm Serenity Russell, founder and CEO of Reborn Properties. Russell? Stephen repeated. That's not even your name. It's my maiden name, I explained. The name I used before I became Richard Wilson's wife and your mother. Why didn't you tell us? Claire asked, looking genuinely hurt. When should I have told you? I countered. When you were relegating me to a tent at the lake house? When you were suggesting I sell my home and move into Jason's basement? Or perhaps when you were researching senior communities to warehouse me in? A heavy silence fell over the room. That's not fair, Jason protested weakly. No, I agreed. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. I rose from my desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city. After your father died, I had choices to make. I could live modestly on his insurance and savings, or I could build something. I chose to build. I turned back to face them. I started small, one property, then another. I took risks. I worked 18-hour days while you were in college, building this company brick by brick. But why keep it a secret? Michael asked. At first, it wasn't a secret. It was simply something that didn't come up, because none of you ever asked about my life. My voice remained calm, factual. Later, when Reborn became successful, I realized none of you saw me as a person with ambitions or abilities. I was just Mom, the woman who cooked your meals and subsidized your lifestyles and could be dismissed to a tent when convenient. That's not true, Alice protested, though her eyes couldn't meet mine. Isn't it? I challenged. In the past 20 years, has any one of you asked me about my dreams, my accomplishments? Has any one of you seen me as something other than an extension of your needs? Sophia, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I always felt there was more to you, Serenity. I just didn't know what. I nodded, acknowledging her perception. Thank you, Sophia. So what happens now? Jason asked, his business mind already calculating. You're our landlord. You're evicting us. And now we know. What's the point of all this? The point, I said, returning to my desk, is that actions have consequences. The way you've treated me, the way you've dismissed and devalued me, has led to this moment. I pressed a button on my desk phone. Margaret, please bring in the folders. Margaret entered with 6 identical manila folders, distributing one to each of them. Inside, you'll find information on the units I mentioned last night. I explained. Studio apartments in buildings I own in Dorchester, Roxbury, and East Boston. As I said, they're nothing fancy, but they're clean, safe, and available immediately. The rent is market rate, no family discount. They opened the folders, flipping through photos of small, basic apartments with dated kitchens and minimal amenities. You can't be serious, Claire said, looking up in disbelief. We can't raise Lily in a studio apartment. Many families do, I pointed out. But you're right. It would be a significant change from your current lifestyle. If this is some kind of punishment, Stephen began. It's not punishment, I interrupted. It's reality. The reality that most people face when they don't have a parent subsidizing their existence. So that's it? Alice's voice broke. You're just going to throw us out on the street if we don't take these hovels? No one's being thrown anywhere, I replied coolly. I'm offering you housing options that align with what you can actually afford based on your incomes. Options many Bostonians would be grateful for. And if we refuse? Michael asked. Then you'll need to find your own housing solutions like any other adults would. We're your children, Jason said, as if that explained everything. Yes, you are, I agreed. And I've spent decades ensuring you had every advantage, every opportunity, every comfort. And how did you repay that? By suggesting I belonged in a tent. By treating me as a servant rather than a mother. By seeing me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected. For the first time, I allowed a hint of emotion to color my voice. You're my children, and I will always love you. But I no longer recognize the entitled adults you've become. So yes, this is happening. You have 60 days to decide. Take the apartments I'm offering or find your own solutions. I stood, indicating our meeting was over. Margaret will answer any questions you have about the units. I have another appointment now. Mom, wait. Alice reached for me, but I stepped back. It's Ms. Russell in this office, I corrected her. And I believe everything has been said. Good day. I walked out, leaving them stunned in my wake, and entered the adjacent conference room where no appointment awaited. Through the thin wall, I could hear their voices rising in panic and anger. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. What I felt was liberation. For decades, I had been defined solely by what I could give them. Now, finally, I was defining myself. The next few weeks unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. First came the angry phone calls, which I let go to voicemail. Then the pleading messages, Jason explaining how Lily needed a yard, Alice detailing how her career would suffer if she had to commute from Dorchester, Michael lamenting how Sophia's migraines would worsen in a substandard apartment. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I channeled my energy into Reborn Properties, finally stepping fully into public view as its founder and CEO. The Boston Business Journal ran a profile on me. The Invisible Developer, how Serenity Russell built a real estate empire in secret. The photo they used showed me standing on the roof of our newest development, the city skyline behind me, looking every inch the successful businesswoman I was. 3 weeks after our confrontation in my office, they began showing up at my home, first individually, then as a united front. I received them in my living room, seated in the armchair that had been my sanctuary for years, the same chair I'd sat in while nursing them as infants, reading bedtime stories, helping with homework, and later, waiting up for them to return from parties and dates. "We've been trying to reach you," Jason began accusingly. "I've been busy," I replied. "The Seaport project is in its final phase." "Too busy for your own children?" Alice's voice quavered. "Apparently you were too busy for your mother when it mattered," I countered. "Or have you forgotten the tent already?" Michael sighed heavily. "Mom, Ms. Russell, whatever you want us to call you, we get it. We treated you poorly. We took you for granted. But this punishment doesn't fit the crime." "This isn't punishment," I corrected him. "This is consequence. There's a difference." "Our leases are up in 3 weeks," Claire said. "We can't find anything in our price range. The rental market is impossible right now." "Yes," I agreed. "That's by design. Reborn has been quite successful at upgrading properties throughout Boston." "So you admit it," Stephen exclaimed. "You're deliberately pricing people out." "I admit to running a successful business," I replied calmly. "One that improves neglected properties and brings them up to modern standards. The market determines the price." "The market you helped create," Alice muttered. I shrugged. "Capitalism works both ways. It gave you comfortable lives, and now it's making those lives less comfortable. The apartments I offered still stand. They're small, but adequate." "We've looked at them," Jason said. "They're not what we're used to." "No," I agreed. "They're not. But they're what most people would be grateful to have." A heavy silence fell over the room. My children exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Mom," Alice finally said, her voice softer now, "we understand you're hurt. We were thoughtless and selfish at the lake house and afterward. We're sorry. Truly sorry." Here it was, the apology I had waited for. But it came not from genuine remorse, but from desperation. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But it doesn't change my decision." "What do you want from us?" Michael asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We've apologized. We've admitted we were wrong. What else can we do?" I studied them carefully, these adults I had raised who still hadn't grasped the fundamental lesson. "It's not about what you can do," I explained. "It's about who you've become. You see me, you've always seen me, as a resource rather than a person. When you thought I had nothing of value to offer except financial support, you dismissed me to a tent. When you discovered I had power, suddenly you want to reconcile." "That's not fair," Jason protested. "Isn't it?" I challenged. Which of you has asked a single question about how I built Reborn? About my dreams or aspirations? About my life outside of being your mother? None of them spoke. You're apologizing because you need something from me, I continued. Not because you truly understand what you did wrong. So this is it? Alice's voice cracked. After everything, you're just cutting us off? I'm treating you like the adults you are, I corrected. Adults who need to experience the consequences of their actions and attitudes. And what about Lily? Claire asked, playing her final card. She's innocent in all this. Would you punish your own granddaughter? For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Lily was indeed innocent, a bright light in my life. Lily will always be welcome in my home, I said after a moment. And I'll continue to contribute to her education fund as promised. But her parents need to stand on their own feet. This isn't you, Michael said, shaking his head. You've always been the most generous person we know, the most forgiving. Perhaps that was the problem, I replied. Perhaps my generosity and forgiveness enabled the entitlement I now see in all of you. They left shortly after, defeated and angry. In the following days, reality set in. Jason and Claire reluctantly took the studio apartment in Roxbury. Michael and Sophia found a small one-bedroom in Somerville, not one of my properties, with rent that consumed nearly half their income. Alice and Stephen moved in with his parents in the suburbs, enduring a 90-minute commute each way. I watched from a distance as they struggled to adjust to lives without safety nets. Weekly family dinners ceased. Birthday celebrations became small, modest affairs. The expensive vacations, designer clothes, and lavish lifestyles they had maintained, partly through my invisible support, disappeared. 3 months after they moved, I invited them all to dinner at my home. They arrived looking tired, humbled, changed by their new circumstances. We ate in strained silence until Alice finally spoke. How did you do it? She asked. Build Reborn from nothing while raising 3 kids alone? It was the first genuine question any of them had asked about my life in years. One building at a time, I replied. I started with a small inheritance from my grandmother, money your father never knew about. I bought a run-down triple-decker in Somerville, renovated it myself on weekends while you were with your father's parents, and reinvested the profits. You did the renovations yourself? Jason asked, surprised. I took classes at the community college, I explained. Nights, weekends, whenever I could. Basic carpentry, plumbing, electrical work. Enough to know when contractors were trying to cheat me. I had no idea, Michael said softly. None of you did, I agreed. Because none of you asked. Well, I'm asking now, Alice said. Tell us about Reborn, about how you built it. So I did. For the first time, I shared the story of my secret life. The challenges, the setbacks, the victories. They listened with genuine interest, asking questions, expressing admiration for obstacles overcome. When the evening ended, I walked them to the door. There were no hugs, no declarations of love or forgiveness. Those would come later, perhaps, if they continued on this path of seeing me as a person rather than merely their mother. Thank you for dinner, Jason said stiffly. And for sharing your story. I nodded. Perhaps we can do it again sometime. We'd like that, Michael replied. After they left, I returned to my living room, to the chair that had witnessed so much of our family history. The revenge I had enacted wasn't about punishing them. Not really. It was about forcing them to see, truly see, the woman who had given them life, who had sacrificed and built and dreamed while they took her for granted. Some wounds can never be forgiven, only avenged. But vengeance doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like truth, laid bare at last. I didn't know if my children and I would ever rebuild what had been broken. But for the first time in decades, they were seeing me, not as a resource or a servant or a tent dweller, but as a woman of substance and achievement, a woman worthy of respect. And that, more than any financial hardship I could inflict, was the truest revenge of all.